Her first job unveiled a family secret. What happened next will leave you speechless. Growing up an only child did not bother Helena. Her parents were amazing. They doted on her every chance they had. Her mother was a lawyer and her father worked in finance. They lived an extremely comfortable life, yet they raised her to be very humble. She would help the housekeeper clean and loved helping the cook in the kitchen. To her, it was normal and she thought nothing of it. When Helena turned 15, she didn't want to be chauffeured to school anymore. She preferred to walk to school with her friends. They would always stop off by a cafe for coffee and croissants. They would joke and talk about the day ahead. They would even stop on their way home from school. The cafe owner and staff knew the girls very well. They would share pleasantries and have hilarious banter. The owner, Miguel, would sometimes come out and share stories with the girls. He told the girls how he was raised in a small village and bought the cafe a few years ago to be close to his son Marco, who was in university. She loved the stories and hoped to meet his son one day. Summer was approaching and Helena didn't want to spend it sitting at home. Yes, she could help around the house, but she yearned for something different this summer. One day, when she entered the cafe, Miguel was sitting at a table. She looked around the cafe, and that's when she produced a brilliant idea. She boldly walks over to Miguel's table, which is deep in paperwork. Her friends watched. They were intrigued to see what their friend had been up to. Clearing her throat to get his attention, she stared him right in the eyes, her chest broad to show confidence. "Mr. Miguel, I would like to work for you," she says. Miguel is impressed with Helena. He leans back in the chair and smiles at the young lady. Regaining his composure, his face turns to stone and gestures for her to sit in the seat across from him. "What experience do you have, and why should I hire you?" he asks as he claps his hands together. Placing them on the table, Helena eagerly sits and begins explaining how she's helped her housekeeper and cook at home. She informs him about her school grades and how she will work hard. Inside, Miguel is proud of how Helena has approached him, but he's still wearing a poker face. Taking a paper from the pile in front of him, he says, "Here is an application, as we are interviewing for summer staff. Please fill it out and return it." Helena could feel her heart racing from nervousness and excitement. She takes the paper, telling him, "I will have it back by the end of the day." Her friends are completely awestruck and cheer her on as they exit the cafe. Miguel sits astounded with a bright smile on his face. At the counter, Marco watched his father. He did not understand why his father was so gleeful. Marco walks over to his father, shaking his head and glaring at his dad with a curious smile. "I'm not sure why you are so happy, but it's nice to see you smiling again, Dad." During lunch, while everyone was eating, Helena focused on completing the application. She still felt the excitement from earlier and hoped Miguel would give her the opportunity. As soon as the last bell rang, Helena hurried out of class with her friends in tow. The girls were reassuring her about the job and giving her pointers. At the cafe, Miguel had been talking to Marco behind the counter. As she walked through the door, the little bell rang, alerting someone was entering. Both men paused the conversation. When Miguel sees Helena, he gets a huge grin on his face. "Did you finish the application?" he asks. Nodding her head yes, she reaches into her satchel and pulls out the paper. Helena's hand trembled a little as she handed the application. Once she felt relaxed, that's when she noticed the young guy standing next to him. They both smile at each other. Marco extends his hand for a handshake and introduces himself. "Hello, I'm Marco, Miguel's son." For a moment, Helena felt something familiar about Marco, like she had seen him somewhere before, but couldn't put her finger on it. "Hi, I'm Helena," she replies. There is an awkwardness in the greeting, but she puts her attention back to Miguel. It only takes a few minutes when he looks up with a smile. "Congratulations, when can you start?" he tells her. Helena jumps for joy. "I can start this weekend if that's okay," she replies to him. Miguel agrees and they set a time for 10 a.m. Marco can't quite understand why this girl looks familiar to him. He studies her for a moment. Feeling perplexed, he pats his dad on the back, nods at Helena with a squeamish smile, and walks to the back. Helena notices Marco's reaction, but didn't let it dampen her ecstatic mood. Running up to the girls, they give her a group hug. They're all happily chatting as they exit the cafe. Walking up the long driveway normally felt tedious to Helena, but this day she ran the whole way to the house. Flinging the door open, she begins calling out for her parents. Her father, Seth, had not made it home yet, but her mother, Josephine, came running out. Helena runs up to her mother, giving her a big hug. "I got my first job," she explains as she starts jumping up and down. Josephine joins her daughter in elation and starts mimicking her. Both ladies regain self-control, and Helena starts telling her mom about the cafe, the job, and Miguel. Josephine is so happy for Helena that she gives her another hug. When Seth arrives home, as soon as he walks through the door, the ladies give him the good news. The whole house is filled with happiness. Cook prepares Helena's favorite dish and a cake for dinner. After things die down, Seth and Josephine begin planning a savings account for Helena. They want to make sure she will be saving money for her future. Saturday morning arrives quickly. Josephine knocks on the door to wake Helena up when she hears Helena moving around in her room. She opens the door. Josephine is surprised to see her daughter fully dressed and ready to leave. She then informs Helena that she'll be taking her to work on her first day. Helena isn't too thrilled, but she knows it would be a losing battle to argue against it. When Josephine pulls up in front of the cafe, she catches sight of Miguel through the window. Her heart felt as though it dropped to the floor. Helena is about to open the car door when she pulls back. Glaring at her mom, she can see the pure shock on her face. "Mom, what is it?" Josephine has turned pale, and her eyes are glossing over with tears. Her voice is trembling when she asks, "Do you know that man standing at the counter?" Peering over, she sees Miguel and starts to smile. "That's Miguel, the owner, Mom," she answers back. It felt like Josephine's heart was about to burst through her chest. She turns completely to look directly at Helena. "Is there a young boy with him?" Helena's eyebrows furrowed curiously. "He's not young, but he does have a son named Marco. He's in university," she replies. Josephine jumps out of the car, leaving Helena completely baffled. Following suit, she jumps out after her mom. Josephine bursts through the cafe doors and the bell sounds. She pauses, waiting for Miguel to turn towards her. Her chest is heaving as she tries to catch her breath. Marco comes from the back because he heard the bell. He's fiddling with his apron when he looks at Josephine. "May I help you?" he asks. Almost bumping into her mom, Helena comes rushing in behind her. Perplexed, she glares at her mom. "What is going on? Why are you acting so strange?" Turning to see what's going on, Miguel lays eyes on Josephine. He drops the mug in his hand and gasps. Marco and Helena are stunned at their parents' reactions towards each other. Steadily, the two make their way towards each other. Josephine has tears streaming down her cheeks, and Miguel has his hand extended to touch her. As the two collide into a tight embrace, Josephine expels a loud and heavy sob. Miguel releases a hefty cry, and the two break down together. Marco and Helena can't believe what they're witnessing, but they dare not interrupt the moment. They stand frozen and puzzled. Miguel and Josephine pull away for a moment to give each other a once-over. Her voice cracking with emotion, she says, "I thought you were dead." Miguel is trying to calm himself when he tells her, "I thought you were dead." Again, they lock in another hard embrace. Carefully, Helena approaches the two. She taps her mother on the shoulder. "Can someone explain what's going on?" she says. Marco has moved from around the counter and he's standing behind his father. This gives Josephine a clear view of him. Trying to blink back the tears, she releases Miguel, setting her full gaze on Marco. Miguel gestures for Marco to come to him. Composing herself, She tries to wipe the tears from her eyes, but they keep coming. Miguel wraps his arm around Marco. His voice is shaky, straightening his posture. He says, "Marco, this is your mother, Josephine." Stunned, Marco's knees wobble a bit. Josephine wraps her arms around him, and Miguel's grip tightens to steady him. Bursting into sobs, Marco wraps his arms around her. Helena is completely dumbfounded. She doesn't know what to think, especially after hearing Miguel introduce Marco as her mother's son. Taking a step back, she shakes her head in disbelief. Her son? "Mom, how is Marco your son?" she asks dazzlingly. Hearing Helena's voice, Josephine's eyes open, and she positions herself to let Miguel get an unobstructed view of Helena. She extends her hand to Helena, who hesitantly takes her mother's hand. Josephine pulls Helena to her side. "This is your daughter, Helena," she informs Miguel proudly. Miguel seeking reassurance in Josephine's eyes. "Helena, after my mother," answering yes with rapid nods. They swoop the whole ensemble into one big hug. This continues for a while until Helena breaks away from them. She does not know how to feel about any of this. She's always believed that Seth was her father. She doesn't want to trample on a family reunion, but she needs someone to explain. "Can someone tell me what is going on? How is he my father and Marco my brother?" Understanding her confusion, Miguel gestures for everyone to sit down at a nearby table. Still holding onto Marco's hand, Josephine takes Helena's into her other hand. She gazes at both with endearment. Miguel sits down next to Helena. It's taking everything in him to keep his composure, but he begins to explain. He told her how 15 years ago he was married to Josephine, that Marco was 3 at the time and they were expecting their second child. Miguel told her about the 2 feuding drug cartels that had taken over the village. Every day, people were being caught in the crosshairs of shootouts, car bombings, and knifings. He explained that one night the house next to them had been blown up, how he managed to get Josephine out of the house and told her to run, how he ran back inside to get Marco, and that was the last time he saw his pregnant wife. Miguel talked about the days he spent looking for her and was told she was taken by the cartel. He had went from city to city for years, searching for his wife and baby. He said that he found someone from the cartel and they told him that she was dead. He cried as he told them how he mourned for them. He then took Josephine's hand in his and they shared a loving glance. Then it was Josephine's turn to share what happened. She told them how she did as he told her and began running for the clearing. How she heard gunfire and people were screaming all around her. She said she didn't stop until she reached the tree line. That's when she noticed they weren't behind her. Josephine said that as she started to run back to the house, it burst into flames, that she called for them but couldn't get close to the house because of the flames. She told of this elderly man who saw her and pulled her away from the burning house. She collapsed from all the stress. The next day, she woke up in a hospital miles away. When she finally made her way back to the village, the house was rubble. Josephine explained that she asked people in the village about them and no one could remember seeing them. Then another neighbor said, "You were dead." They heard Miguel screaming from the house. Josephine told them how she mourned them and that eventually she made her way to the city. At first, she lived in a women's shelter, and that a month later, she gave birth to Helena. The shelter had a nursery, so she was able to find a job. In a matter of months, they were able to move into a little apartment. She boasted about going back to school. Josephine said that it took a while for her to move on, but when Helena was 4 years old, she met Seth and how happy they were. She reassured Miguel that Seth was a good man and that he had been a great father to Helena. Sadly, Miguel hadn't remarried. He focused on raising Marco and explained how he came to buy the cafe a few years ago. Miguel stared at Helena. He told Josephine that the first time he saw her, he thought he was looking at a ghost. She was the spitting image of Josephine at that age. Realization hit Marco, as that would explain why his father was so warm towards Helena. He also realized it must have been a sibling connection to why he felt familiar with her as well. Josephine also informed them that when Helena mentioned the owner's name was Miguel, it made her very curious to see the cafe, to see this Miguel that Helena spoke so highly of. That night, Josephine introduced Miguel and Marco to Seth. They explained everything to him. Seth knew about them, but was very flabbergasted. It would take some time, but he knows they can come together as one big happy family. Life has a way of balancing things out, bringing together what was torn apart. Never lose faith, because we don't know what may present itself when you least expect it.